Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Central High School Virtual Veterans Day ceremony. This is very different than the Veterans Day programs we've done in the past, but we wanted to do something to honor our veterans that are so important to us and to our great nation. So I ask you to sit back. We have two fantastic guest speakers, Representative Steele and Mr. Jake Eckhart. We also have performances by the Central High School Choir and Band, and then a tribute at the end for many of our servicemen and women. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you to our veterans, and please enjoy the program.
Today, we celebrate our nation's veterans. And to the 45,000 veterans in Southeast Wisconsin, happy Veterans Day. I'm Brian Stile, a congressman representing Southeast Wisconsin. It was great to join you in the gym last year as we celebrated Veterans Day. I'm guessing some of the seniors who were there in the gym last year are now serving our country in the armed forces. I suspect some of the seniors listening today are considering joining. If you do, know it is a great service to our country. 2020 has been a difficult year, but I know together we will get through it. And I hope to join you in person again next year. I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to our veterans and their families for their service and sacrifice to this great country. Let me tell you a bit about the history of Veterans Day. Veterans Day was originally called Armistice Day. Armistice Day celebrated the one-year anniversary of the signing of the armistice between the Allies and Germany. The armistice was signed at the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. In 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower changed the name to Veterans Day. Veterans Day not only celebrates veterans from World War I, but our American heroes from all wars, from the brave patriots who fired the first shots at the battles of Lexington and Concord, to the jungles of Vietnam, to the most recent conflicts in the Middle East and Afghanistan. Veterans Day honors and celebrates our fellow Americans who have bravely served our country and who have stood up for liberty at home and abroad. Let's take a moment to think back 75 years ago to 1945. 1945 was an important year for our country. It was an important year for the world. In May of 1945, our troops declared victory over Nazi Germany. In August of that year, we declared victory over Japan in the Pacific. Americans had just won back-to-back world wars and were triumphantly returning home 75 years ago today. These heroes saved the world. It's not lost on anyone that this nation would not be what it is today without the sacrifices made by generations of service members. I learned this from my grandpa. He was one of those soldiers returning home from the Pacific after World War II. One of my fondest memories of my grandpa was when we took a walk around Camp Randall in Madison. It was a beautiful fall Wisconsin football afternoon. We stopped to look inside the stadium when my grandpa told me that when he came home from World War II, he lived there at Camp Randall inside the stadium. There wasn't enough room for all the veterans who were returning back home from World War II to live on campus, so many, like my grandpa, were housed at the stadium in tents or small rooms. I told my grandpas when I was a little kid that it must have been horrible living in this little room with lots of guys at the football stadium. He looked at me and said it was a heck of a lot better than the living conditions he had in Papua New Guinea. While serving in World War II, you understand what sacrifice must have been like. And as a kid, I started to understand the sacrifice our veterans have made for our country. To my grandpa, to all those who served with, and all those who've answered the call of duty in our country, we're grateful for you. Our American heroes, service, and sacrifice must never be forgotten. It's critical we do all we can to support them and their families. Helping our veterans should never be a partisan issue. I've made it a priority to support our veterans through policy and through casework assistance day in and day out. Whether it's helping a veteran get the benefits they earned through the VA or making sure that veterans get the health care that they need across the board, I stand ready to help. A bill that recently became law that I've been a long time advocate and champion for is the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act, which designates 988 as the National Suicide Hotline. A special designation for veterans directly connects veterans to the Veterans Crisis Line so that we, together, can better serve those who are experiencing a mental health crisis. Let me share a short story. Last year, I was driving across southeast Wisconsin when I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Ken Skronsky. He called me to let me know that a veteran with no next of kin was having a funeral and was being laid to rest in the Union Grove Veteran Cemetery. Ken asked if I could attend, so I turned my car around and headed that way. When I got there, there wasn't a parking spot left. And when I got inside, there was nowhere to sit, barely anywhere to stand. When I asked Ken who these people were, he told me that there were folks from across our community who showed up to honor this veteran. This kind of experience makes you realize how great our community here in southeast Wisconsin is. To our veterans, thank you for your service. To my fellow Americans, we must always honor and celebrate and support our veterans. Be sure to thank a veteran today. Veterans Day isn't the only time you can thank a veteran. Next time you see a veteran at the grocery store around town, proudly wearing a Navy or an Air Force hat, an Army shirt or a Coast Guard shirt or a Marine jacket, thank them. Let them know you appreciate their service, sacrifice, and that their commitment to this nation does not go unnoticed. I look forward to seeing you in person again soon. Thank you, and God bless.
We are the Westosha Central High School Wind Ensemble, and for today's virtual Veterans Day ceremony, we will be performing Military Escort by Harold Bennett.
Thank you, Central staff and students, for having me as your speaker for this virtual Veterans Day program. I always wanted to join the Army ever since I was 5 years old. That was my plan after high school. Halfway through my senior year, I signed up and enlisted in the Army. I graduated from Westosha High School on June 6, 1993, and left for basic training on July 7th. Even though it was my childhood dream to serve my country, I never really knew what the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was. I had only seen it a couple of times on the news around Memorial Day and Veterans Day, when the president would lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns. But even then, I didn't understand the meaning of this wreath ceremony or where it was. On July 7th, I was sitting in the MEP station, which is the Military Entry Processing Station in Milwaukee. And there was this soldier magazine lying there, so I started paging through it. There was an article about the Old Guard. It had interviews with soldiers assigned there and explained all their duties, such as funerals in Arlington National Cemetery, ceremonies at the White House and Pentagon, the U.S. Army drill team, and sentinels at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. I thought that would be kind of cool to do, but never thought I would have an opportunity to do it, so I put the magazine down and never gave it a second thought. A couple days later, I was at the in-processing station for basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I noticed several guys were gone for a while. When they came back, I asked one of them where they went. He said they went to see the Old Guard recruiter. I asked, "What's the Old Guard?" completely forgetting about the article I had read a couple days before. He told me what they did, and the first thing he mentioned was they were the ones that guard the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. At that moment, something clicked. That's what I wanted to do. I can still remember that feeling as if it was yesterday. I was never so excited or had such a desire to do something as much as I did when that light went off. So the next time the Old Guard recruiter came by, I was there to sign up and volunteer. I can still remember my dad saying, as he dropped me off at the MEP station, "Don't volunteer for anything." And here I was, not even in basic training yet, and I volunteered for the Old Guard. But in my heart, I knew I was making the right decision. When I arrived at Fort Myer, Virginia, home of the Old Guard, in October of 1993, that is all I thought about. Every chance I could, I would ask my squad leader, when can I try out for the Tomb Guards? Then I found out that you had to be assigned to the line companies for at least a year before you could volunteer for one of the specialty units like the Tomb. In February of 1994, there was about 30 of us that went back down to Fort Benning for airborne school. One of the soldiers was Corporal Rippey, who happened to be a sentinel at the Tomb. You could tell just by looking at him, the way he carried himself, his bearing, his tack, and his uniform was perfectly pressed, and this was only his BDUs. I could only imagine what his dress blues would look like. He was very nice and very approachable. For the next 3 weeks of airborne school, I asked him questions every day, and he never tired of them. This was my first contact with a real Tomb Guard, and it made my desire that much stronger to become one of these elite soldiers. This is where my persistence paid off. I must have worn down my squad leader, because after being in Charlie Company for only 9 months, I was told I was able to try out for the Tomb. Finally, the goal I had set back in basic training was coming true. But I was still 7 very intense months away from becoming a badge-holding Tomb Guard. On my very first day at the Tomb, I realized that these were a different breed of soldier. There was a lot more to this duty than being able to count to 21 and walk back and forth. I found out that they don't let anyone be a Tomb Guard. The first 2 weeks of training are just to see if you have the drive and the desire to be down there. By no means are you able to perform your duties as a sentinel, but they see if you have the ability to be trained to become a proficient Tomb Guard. Out of 10 soldiers that try out, only 1 or 2 will make it through the training to earn the Covenant Tomb Badge. The Tomb Guard badge is the least awarded badge in the U.S. Army. The only badge that is awarded less in the entire military is the Astronaut Badge. Since the badge was first awarded in 1958, there have only been 693 awarded to date. I'm badge number 414. After those first 2 weeks, the real training begins. That includes uniform preparation, how to walk the mat, how to perform a guard change, and memorizing all of the knowledge that goes along with being a sentinel. The first thing they teach you is the Sentinel's Creed. My dedication to the sacred duty is total and wholehearted. In the responsibility bestowed on me, never will I falter. And with dignity and perseverance, my standard will remain perfection. Through the years of diligence and praise and the discomfort of the elements, I will walk my tour in humble reverence to the best of my ability. It is he who commands the respect I protect, his bravery that made us so proud. Surrounded by well-meaning crowds by day, alone in the thoughtful peace of night, this soldier will in honored glory rest under my eternal vigilance. That was written by a sentinel in 1971 and has been the mission statement ever since. The main thing they get you to understand is attention to detail. From the top of your hat down to the soles of your shoes, everything needs to be perfectly pressed and shine. There is no room for imperfection. Only perfection is the standard. It goes back to the Sentinel's Creed, line 6. If you ask any sentinel what line 6 is, they will answer, my standard will remain perfection. This is the ultimate goal of any sentinel. The training is very intense. As a new man, you are on very little to no sleep over 2 to 3 day periods for the entire training, which depending on your proficiency is anywhere from 6 to 9 months long. You are tested on your uniform preparation, which as a new man takes about 8 hours on your day off, your ability to walk the mat and basic knowledge of the tomb and the cemetery, which consists of about 35 pages of question to be learned word for word, and 300 servicemen and women buried in Arlington National Cemetery. You need to know their location and history of their career. Like any other military unit, the tomb guards are a brotherhood. I still have guys I keep in touch with even after 23 years. And now with Facebook, I have met more tomb guards from both before and after my time there. But this brotherhood goes up to and beyond the grave. I want to share a ghost story with you because after working in a cemetery for 3 years and 24-hour shifts, you see and hear strange things that can't be explained. I was about 2 or 3 months into my training, and I had most of my 300 servicemen names and locations memorized. But that day they threw a new one at me. They said, go get a rubbing of the headstone of Jason Todd Wiseman and be back in 15 minutes. Now I did not know who that was or where he was buried. Keep in mind the cemetery is 612 acres. Luckily they told me the section he was buried in, 60, which was a halfway across the cemetery. Now depending on the section in the cemetery, it could look like any civilian cemetery with all different types of headstones, or they're the government white headstones you see in those iconic pictures of Arlington National Cemetery. Well, section 60 is about as iconic as it gets, and about 1 acre in size. When I arrived, I knew I did not have much time, so I decided to go through the section looking at 2 rows at a time. This is also about 2 o'clock in the afternoon with a bright blue sky. When I reached the end of the section, I still did not find him. So as a last resort, I jokingly looked up and said, please give me a sign. And when I looked down, out in the middle of the section, his name was raised out of his headstone. All the other headstones looked normal, but his stuck out like I had 3D glasses on. I looked at it for a couple of seconds and just thought, wow. So as I got his headstone rubbing and made it back in time, once I got back there, they told me who he was. He was a former tomb guard from the 80s that had died after his service and was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. It wasn't until later that night that I realized what had happened. It was a fellow tomb guard helping out a new man. After that, I had no doubt I was going to make it through training. After 7 months, I had earned my badge. I was assigned there for 3 years, and during that time, I had acquired 900 walks and 702 guard changes. At the end of my time there, my back, knees, and ankles really took a beating. I now go to the chiropractor every 2 to 3 weeks, but that is a small price to pay compared to the sacrifice that the unknowns made. Not only did they die for their country, but they made the ultimate sacrifice and gave up their identity. Many people don't understand the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Memorial Day is to honor those that have died while protecting and serving this country. Veterans Day is to honor and thank those service members that are still with us, to thank them for the time in their life that they were ready and prepared to make that ultimate sacrifice. So sometime today, I would like all of you to personally thank the veterans you know. To a tomb guard, every day is Veterans Day. They say if you love your job, you never have to work a day in your life. Well, for 3 years, my service at the tomb never felt like work. I went to honor the unknowns of this great nation. At the tomb, they say soldiers never die until they are forgotten. Tomb guards never forget.